Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have once again made it to the end of a very eventful week. We have good, bad, and crazy martinis for you today. And Jim, first of all, we should probably follow up on yesterday's first martini, where the headline for hours was just Mike Waltz is out as National Security Advisor, which didn't really tell the whole story. I guess the administration probably could have put something out, but ultimately he's not being really fired. He's being reassigned. He's now the president's nominee to be U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. Of course, the original nominee was Elise Stefanik. The president pulled that nomination so he'd have as many votes as possible in the House of Representatives for his big tax cut extension bill, border security bill coming up. And so Mike Waltz getting reassigned. We don't know who the next full-time national security advisor will be, but until then, it's Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is now the first person to hold both of those titles since Henry Kissinger. So, Jim, it's obvious that Mike Waltz is still in Trump's good graces and that Trump really likes Marco Rubio.
Indeed, Greg. Marco Rubio is now the Secretary of State, the acting National Security Advisor. Also running USAID. It's now all been folded into the State Department. I believe he's also the archivist. New jobs numbers were out this morning, and it was generally good news, but it turned out that of all the jobs created the month of April, 40% were filled by Marco Rubio. That's how much he's been. Just quick note on, I'm glad Waltz is not leaving the administration. I will not buy into any spin that this was not a demotion. You would much rather be the president's national security advisor with him almost every day, probably sitting in on the national security briefings, and, rather than being up in New York at Turtle Bay voting no against whatever dumb idea is coming through the UN that particular day. So I do believe this is a demotion, but, not as bad as it seemed 24 hours ago.
Waiting around for a national security advisor is one thing. Waiting around to get to the doctor could be a big problem, depending on what you have going on. And there's lots of excuses that we come up with. We're too busy. It'll probably go away. It's too expensive, whatever. We come up with good excuses. But now there's no reason to delay because of ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare high-quality in-network doctors and click to instantly book an appointment.
You can filter for doctors who take your insurance, are located nearby, are a good fit for any particular medical need you may have, and are highly rated by verified patients. And appointments made through ZocDoc often happen fast. Sometimes you could even score same-day appointments.
Yeah, I've told the story before about one of the specialists I was referred to who just wanted to do surgery, and even though it might not be necessary, that's not my style. So a friend recommended a different doctor in that field. Went on ZocDoc, found that she was exactly the type of doctor that I like, surgery as a last resort and that sort of thing. Stop putting off those doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/3ML to find and instantly book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/3ML. ZocDoc.com/3ML. All right, Jim. Well, while we look at what's happening in the Trump administration, there's also the Democrats who are continuing to flail, even though Trump's overall approval numbers have dipped. Numbers from a variety of polls still show Trump with a slight edge over Kamala Harris if the election were to be rerun today. Trump also more trusted on the immigration issue as well as the economy. And the Democrats are just rudderless right now. And there's all sorts of infighting, not only at the DNC, which we've talked about at length, but even among Democrats up on Capitol Hill. And now it appears that Hakeem Jeffries doesn't want to have much to do with Nancy Pelosi anymore. Nancy Pelosi, of course, ruling House Democrats with an iron fist for well over 2 decades. But now, according to Politico, House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries received mad props. That's the lead. Mad props from the base this spring for his showdown with the GOP over Elon Musk and a potential government shutdown. But to hear one longtime Nancy Pelosi whisperer tell it, the New York Democrats' leadership is lacking. And so this former advisor to Pelosi is Ashley Etienne. She also worked for Obama. She's worked for Kamala Harris. She's worked for other people in high-stakes Democratic politics. And she says, while she has a tremendous amount of respect, quote unquote, for Jeffries, she's concerned about what she's heard from Democrats privately, that he hasn't shown enough backbone, that his organizational skills are deficient at a time when strong creative leadership is badly needed. And the worst thing of all, Jim, he's not listening to Nancy Pelosi anymore. Etienne says Jeffries' team has spurned the idea of seeking advice from Pelosi or her former team. She said she recently ran into Jeffries' staffers and offered to help them, but they told her that the members don't want any Pelosi. She says, I was hearing from the leadership staff that the leadership on Capitol Hill right now wants to sort of move away from that Pelosi era, that they don't want to embrace anyone or anything that's like Pelosi, she said, which I just think is the dumbest expletive ever. So, Jim, more food fights on the left. You got to love that. And the fact that they're actually trying to ice out Nancy Pelosi, good luck. There's probably a bus coming for you somewhere.
Greg, I must point out, I did not expect to close out the week by saying I have never felt more like Hakeem Jeffries ever than by hearing that he wants nothing to do with Nancy Pelosi. First of all, there's nothing wrong with a leader of a party in a chamber like the House deciding he wants to be his own man, that he's not going to be running off to the previous leader to say, well, how would you handle this or something like that. We always thought it was this very big deal that she was stepping down as the leader of the Democrats, but she was, staying in the House. And kind of this question of whether she was going to remain the power behind the throne or maybe kind of a shadow minority leader. She certainly sounds like a backseat driver in this sense, and kind of a why aren't you doing it? The second thing that I just feel like is worth noting, Nancy Pelosi is 85 years old. Joe Biden can call her old, right? That's the perspective. She's like, we won 40 seats together. Yeah, that was like 2006. This like the glory days of Nancy Pelosi are well behind her, unless you want to characterize shivving Joe Biden as, one of her greatest accomplishments of all time. I remember, back when writing about Syria earlier this year, I ran the picture of Assad meeting with Nancy Pelosi way back in the late years of George W. Bush. And I just thought, God, you imagine that years later, one of those two leaders would take down an American president. And it wasn't Assad. I don't think it's unreasonable for Hakeem Jeffries to say, hey, it's 2025. It's not 2006 anymore. It's not 2018 anymore. It is time for, I'm in charge now. I am the leader of this party. And if I feel like talking to you, Nancy, I'll call you. But I'm the one who's in the party leader chair now. And, here's your gold watch. Enjoy riding off into the sunset. Enjoy your time on Billionaires Row. I don't think Hakeem Jeffries is obligated to check in with her all that often to say, how would you do it, Nancy? How do you think I'm doing? So I just think this advice makes Miss Etienne the most disappointing Etienne since Travis with the Jaguars last year.
Well, this is great, though. Not only are they sniping at each other publicly, which is always fun, Hakeem Jeffries isn't really a great leader. We've talked about this. Just this week, he went from, go down to El Salvador and make a big protest about Abrego Garcia. Now this week, later in the week, he's, actually, no, nobody else go back down there. He was out there saying, I want this fight about the Republican bill to prove you're a citizen before you can vote. That's voter suppression. And everybody else is like, you should have to prove you're a citizen, actually. So he's picking the wrong fights. He's not a particularly good messenger. But the fact that Nancy Pelosi is persona non grata, it's just great all around. What a better way to head into the weekend.
I feel like Jeffries is getting a bit of the Chuck Schumer treatment of, well, we don't like the situation we're in, so it must be your fault. No, the problem is he's in the House minority. There's only so much you can do. So, yeah, I know. This is the most sympathetic take to Hakeem Jeffries you're ever going to hear on this podcast.
One of the reasons the Democrats are struggling, of course, is because they had inflation wrapped around their neck during the 2024 elections, and that the Republicans certainly benefited from that. And so understanding the economy, definitely an advantage if you want to advance in politics, and putting in good policies that reap results. Capitalism, embracing capitalism is the way to do that. And while you might not get that at every college in America, and certainly most colleges in America, at Hillsdale College, you will. I certainly did in my economics classes there, and now you can too in Hillsdale College's latest free online class, Understanding Capitalism.
In fact, Hillsdale College is offering more than 40 free online courses. You can learn about the U.S. Constitution, the stories in the book of Genesis, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. And let's face it, just about everybody on Capitol Hill could use a new course, Understanding Capitalism, with the exception of one who seems to be doing really well in the markets lately, foreshadowing our next martini.
That's exactly right. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll in this course, Understanding Capitalism. There is no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll for free. All right, Jim, on to our bad martini. Excellent foreshadowing. Mikey Sherrill is a congresswoman from the great state of New Jersey, Jim Garrity's original home state, and she is now running for governor this year in New Jersey. I have no idea if she's expected to win the nomination. If she does, I'm sure she'll be a prohibitive favorite, but maybe not the more this gets discussed. This is from the Free Beacon. She's the queen of capital gains, capital with an O-L. New Jersey Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill has banked millions of dollars since coming to Congress in 2019, according to a review of her financial disclosures by the Washington Free Beacon. In her 2019 financial disclosures, so right when she got to Washington, Sherrill reported assets totaling between $733,000 and change and $4.3 million and change. By 2024, those figures had ballooned to between $4.8 million and $13.975 million, so almost $14 million. The wide swing of ranges comes because federal financial disclosure forms require each asset to be listed as between a range of values. That requirement means that Sherrill, in theory, could have only seen an asset increase of roughly $500,000, but that possibility is unlikely. Using the average of the two ranges would place Sherrill's asset increase at just under $7 million. Members of the House make an annual salary of $174,000, and the meteoric rise of Sherrill's net worth comes as a result of the exemplary performance of her stock portfolio. Though it remains controversial, members of Congress are allowed to trade stocks as long as all transactions are assiduously reported within 30 days under the rules of the 2012 Stock Act. Sherrill is one of the chamber's more prolific traders, with hundreds listed on her report since her election. In December, she paid a $400 fine after failing to disclose up to $350,000 in stock sales. Most eyebrow-raising are the hundreds of trades Sherrill made during the coronavirus pandemic. As a member of Congress sitting on the House Armed Services Committee, she had access to information surrounding the unfolding pandemic, but not available to the general public. In a flurry of purchases in early 2020, she bought into a number of funds that went on to post handsome profits, according to data from NASDAQ. So, Jim, I encourage folks to read the rest of the details at the Free Beacon. But it's one of these situations like Pelosi that, man, their luck at just the perfect time to buy and sell stock is remarkable, especially over a period of several years.
Greg, when you first sent this, I began reading into it. I'm like, well, okay, 2019 to 2024, the stock market had a pretty darn good run. So maybe it's you even if you weren't having any special information, you'd expect it to go up. But I then ran the numbers. You're talking like minimum, with more likelihood she's probably increased her net worth from like 3 to 4 times. I won't ask about the Columbus family finances. I could just tell you my net worth has not, but again, been pretty good, but it's not have been increasing 3 to 4 times. Very few people have their net worth quadruple in a 4-year span, 5-year span. So that just seems really, and $174,000 a year, standard salary for a member of Congress. Look, that's good, but you're not going to have 6-figure sums to throw around putting into a market, buying a particular stock or a particular mutual fund and taking money out. And you look at these numbers, she's making $250,000, moves and 250, now again, it's within a range or something like that. So first of all, I think this demonstrates the disclosure laws for Congress are insufficient. 30 days requirement seems like a really, that doesn't strike me as a terribly tough deadline at all. The disclosure of ranges, I think at minimum, we should make the ranges smaller because, it is kind of absurd. I used to write these kind of stories back in my wire service days all the time. And you'd say that, at minimum, the member of Congress is worth this much, at maximum. And every reader is like, well, what is it? I'm like, well, I can't tell you because it doesn't say so. All I can tell you is what's in the document there. But again, it is very tough to believe that she was just lucky enough to, quadruple her net worth in a span of like 4 or 5 years. No inside trading, no insight from what she was doing up on Capitol Hill. Just it's like Hillary with the cattle futures. It's just amazing how well these investments turned out. Kudos to the Free Beacon for calling attention to this. I hope publications in New Jersey will pay attention. I hope this, if she's running for governor, this absolutely should be an issue in it. We'll see if anything happens. I don't expect anything to happen out of it, but the cynicism about members of Congress and the idea of them doing. Let's point out also, by the way, that she does co-sponsor legislation banning members from trading individual stocks, saying that she no longer does this. Well, I'd like to know when she stopped, because it's sure. Was it when you hit the first 4 million, you feel okay? Is that what it is?
The problem with financial scandals, Jim, and part of it's whether the media wants people to understand the financial scandal or not, is that the public yawns because it starts to get complicated. Remember when we thought we had Clinton dead to rights on the Chinese fundraising scandal, and then everybody kind of glazed over while Fred Thompson was leading those hearings? Same thing with Whitewater. Props to Saturday Night Live for doing the We Are the World style explanation of Whitewater, which is still one of my favorite skits and shows the creativity they had at the time. But overall, people glaze over. You need something like Clinton Lewinsky, unfortunately, for people like, okay, I understand that. That's really bad, and he probably ought not be president.
I was going to say, throughout the 1990s, Whitewater was often described and dismissed in the mainstream media as an obscure land deal. Kind of like, how could anybody, they have zoning regulation. No, he bought it at a cheap price, knowing that the government was going to want to do stuff, knowing that the government was going to put stuff right next to it, was going to make it more valuable. And then it became a lot more valuable, and then he sold it for more. It's not that complicated. This, buy low, sell hot. You can get that. And the idea is they knew something about it. And it was this, who can tell? Go back to the beginning of this country. Obscure land deals were like the bread and butter of corruption, right? Like this is what local government does. Zoning. We're going to put the road here. We're not going to put the road there. We're going to develop the new mini mall here. Like where the railroad was going to be. That was a huge, difference in the economies of towns and stuff like that. It's like, land. It's so complicated. Yes, anybody who's bought real estate can understand this.
That's the media, though. Obscure land deal or little used law. Remember those things we hear with?
Well, it means it doesn't count.
Yes.
An obscure law. Well, no one can be expected to obey those.
The spin on that stuff, making it go away for the Clintons was bad enough. The most painful thing was in the 2016 campaign, when somebody mentioned Whitewater, and some of the reporters who were covering the Clinton campaign 20 some years after it broke didn't even know what it was. They had never heard of it. So.
An embedded reporter, unidentified which publication it was, but that was a sign we are old, and it is a sign that these embedded reporters are remarkable. Like, how do you cover a candidate and particularly a candidate like Hillary Clinton, and not crack a book about them? The world is more than 40 years old.
All right. Well, let's talk about stuff better than how the media covers Democratic scandals. So let's get real about aging. Have you started noticing signs like poor sleep or low energy or stiff joints? Well, maybe even some bigger health concerns than that, perhaps. Well, aging is personal, and we all feel it in different ways. And so we're always looking for ways to feel better. And that's why we're excited to talk about C15 from Fatty 15. It's the first essential fatty acid to be discovered in more than 90 years. It's an incredible scientific breakthrough to support our long-term health and wellness and improves aging and longevity.
If the pop culture references on this podcast seem relevant to you, you probably need C15 from Fatty 15. Without C15, cells become fragile and age faster, which accelerates your overall aging. This led to the discovery of the first new nutrient deficiency in 75 years, cellular fragility syndrome, which may affect up to 1 in 3 people worldwide.
Fatty 15 is on a mission to optimize your C15 levels to help you live healthier and longer. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/3ml. And then use the code 3ML at checkout. That's Fatty15, fatty15.com/3ML, code 3ML. All right, Jim, let's hop across the Delaware River from New Jersey over to Pennsylvania. That's where John Fetterman has been a senator since the 2022 midterms. New York Magazine has decided to do, I don't know if it's exactly called a profile, but a story on John Fetterman.
Hit piece. Hit piece is the term you're looking for.
Exactly. So Ed Morrissey over at Hot Air is writing on this and pointing out the complete 180 on this, because during the campaign, of course, Fetterman suffered a very serious stroke just before primary election day. They hid it for as long as they could. But then he came out to campaign, be part of a debate, and it was obvious he was having some very serious problems. Republicans said he wasn't fit for office. Democrats insisted he was. He still beat Dr. Oz, and that's how he got to the Senate. And after some time off for, I think it was depression or something, he comes back and he seems to be operating better now. But now the left doesn't like him as much because he's not marching in lockstep, particularly on Israel, but on some other issues as well, because Jim, horror of all horrors, he considered, didn't do it, considered voting to confirm Pete Hegseth as defense secretary. The story also goes on to talk about shouting matches between Fetterman and his wife Giselle about Israel versus Hamas. And she thinks Israel's committing war crimes. He says it's propaganda and all this stuff, and on it goes. The staffers are suggesting that he's not all there mentally. And so would this happen if John Fetterman had the voting record and the public comment record that was completely in line with the Democratic Party? Probably not.
This is really stuck in my craw. I wrote about it a little bit at the end of today's Morning Jolt. Also, my colleague Noah Rothman did a really good, we used to call this fisking back in the old blogger days of the article. And we should point out, it's not absolute nonsense. There's a point of reportedly he's not on his meds, or he's not always taking his medication, which would be very serious, or can be very serious. The description of the fight with Giselle is a little bit illuminating for those of us who remember her being kind of speaking on his behalf and seeming much more to the left than he had seemed in his previous statements, or certainly his current statements. He was in a car accident last year. You kind of wonder if he, God forbid, there was some sort of, people who are recovering from strokes sometimes have setbacks. Sometimes it's a long, hard road, and so. My only interaction with him was in the Fox News green room for a few minutes. Seemed to be doing fine, or in much better shape than before. And so I was, you wish him well. It's conceivable that he's still not 100%, but I think Noah put it very well, that the timing of this is really odd. And it's really even worse when you think back to how we discovered. Because remember, he had a note from his doctor saying he had no issues that was issued 1 week before that debate. And in that debate, he could barely talk. Like that was, I remember at the time, you and I and a whole bunch of other folks on the right side of the aisle are like, this guy needs to focus on his recovery. He is not well. He is not able to do all of his duties. Now, bit by bit, he's gotten better. But Noah writes and he observes, in the wake of his stroke, during his election to the Senate, and then he had his struggles in the job, culminating in his admission to Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. And Noah puts in the links. Americans were told that he was just fine, right? We were told nothing to worry about. This is perfectly normal. He was on the cover of Time. He was on the cover of New York Magazine back during the campaign. And the whole thing was about how brave he was and how we should all look at this with sympathy. And it was considered, only a right-wing crank would argue he could not perform the duties as senator. So today, we see him on TV a lot more. He's a lot easier to understand. His words are much more articulate and fluid. Every once in a while, he still has troubles. There's no about it. When I saw him in the Fox News green room, he has this little iPad, and it transcribes what you say very quickly, so he can read it and check to make sure that he's hearing it and understanding it correctly. But as Noah writes, his speech patterns seem to have been fully recovered. His outward performance of the job is no longer a source of general apprehension. Now we're told he's really unwell. The language his handlers employed were eerily reminiscent of how Biden's minders described the ailing president. Quote, he has good days and bad days. He's struggling, the Bulwark's Tim Miller confessed after a March interview with Fetterman. Really? Why does he seem so much better now? And now they're saying, now, I don't know if this guy can do the job. Wow, I'm not around him often enough to know if there's truth to this. But it just seems awfully politically convenient that only after he started pissing off progressives, all of a sudden now they see problems. Whereas when he was drooling on himself on the debates there, then everything was hunky-dory. I called nonsense on this. This seems very suspicious. It comes from Adam Gentleson, who I've always thought poorly of. Used to be Harry Reid's top guy, was his chief of staff for a stretch. Gentleson left because Fetterman wasn't great on the Israeli issue. Gentleson is clearly a big source for this article. And look, God forbid he really is struggling. God forbid he really is having problems or he's not taking his meds and that's causing issues. Senator Fetterman, I hope you get all the help you need and I hope you follow your doctor's advice. But this emits an odor of progressive staffers who thought that they were getting a guy who was going to be on their side. Fetterman deviates from on Israel, Bob Menendez, and a bit on the border. I know you mentioned that he was contemplating vote. Like you think he's still pro-choice. He's still pro-unions. There's a whole bunch of issues in which he still votes with the Democratic mainstream. But that's, all these four, he deviates on these four issues. Clearly he's not well, and that's why they're saying, he can't do this anymore.
One of the scandals, quote unquote, about Fetterman is that he actually met with as many of the Trump nominees as possible. Didn't vote for most of them, I don't think. But the fact that he would even sit down and have a conversation with someone nominated by this president, absolutely beyond the pale. And if we're at that point, we got some really big problems.
Yeah, but by the way, it's put out, Trump won Pennsylvania 2 out of the last 3 times.
Right.
Like it's not like Trump is this, persona non grata in the entire state of Pennsylvania. It's not surprising Fetterman can say, I met with him, I sat down with him, but in the end, I thought we had too many. Like he can at least make that his point. Like he was willing to meet with them, he was willing to have a conversation, and I think that probably does him a lot of good in a state like Pennsylvania. But absolutely, the other thing also is that he's not up until 2028, right?
Right.
Like it's not like it's not like you can force him out now. So we'll see how it was really weirdly timed that now all kinds of now he's really in trouble. Never mind all that clear speaking he's doing.
Jim, have a good weekend. See you Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific weekend and join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.